Chapter 14. Flash Powder and Funerals. Next to motion study and astronomy, photography was the science nearest to Dad's heart. He had converted most of the two-story barn in Montclair into a photographic laboratory. It was here that Mr. Coggin, Dad's English photographer, held forth behind a series of triple-locked doors. Children made Mr. Coggin nervous, particularly when they opened the door of his darkroom when he was in the middle of developing a week's supply of film. Even in front of Dad and Mother, he referred to us as blighters and beggars. Behind their backs, he called us horse thieves, bloody bastards, and worse. At one time, shortly after Dad had had an addition built on our cottage at Nantucket, he told Mr. Coggin, "I want you to go up there and get some pictures of the L on the house." "Haw," said Mr. Coggin. "I've taken many a picture of the L in your house, but this will be the first time I've taken one of the L on your house." When Mr. Coggin departed after the unfortunate debacle concerning our tonsils, a series of other professional cameramen came and went. Dad always thought, and with some justification, that none of the professionals were as good as a photographer as he. Consequently, when it came to taking pictures of the family, Dad liked to do the job himself. He liked to do the job as often as possible, rain or shine, day or night, summer or winter, and especially on Sundays. Most photographers prefer sunlight for their pictures, but Dad liked it best when there was no sun, and he had an excuse to take pictures indoors. He seemed to have a special affinity for flashlight powder, and the bigger the flash, the more he enjoyed it. He'd pour great gray mountains of the powder into the pan at the top of this T-shaped flash gun, and hold this as far over his head as possible with his left hand, while he burrowed beneath a black cloth at the stern of the camera. In his right hand, he'd hold the shutter release and a toy of some kind, which he'd shake and rattle to get our attention. Probably few men have walked away from the larger flashlight explosions than those Dad set off as a matter of routine. The ceilings of some of the rooms in Montclair bore charred black circles in mute testimony to his intrepidity as an exploder. Some of the professional photographers, seeing him load a flash gun, would blanch, mutter, and hasten from the room. "I know what I'm doing," Dad would shout after them irritably. "Go ahead, then, if you don't want to learn anything, but when I'm through, just compare the finished product with the kind of work you do." The older children had been through it so often that, while somewhat shell-shocked, they were no longer terrified. It would be stretching a point to say that they had developed any real confidence in Dad's indoor photography, but at least they had adopted a fatalistic attitude that death, if it came, would be swift and painless. The younger children, unfortunately, had no such comforting philosophy to fall back on. Even the latest model was aware that all hell was liable to break loose at any time after Dad submerged under the black cloth. They'd behaved pretty well right up to that time Dad was going to take the picture. Then they'd start bellowing. "Lily, stop those children from crying," Dad would shout from under the black cloth. "Dan, open your eyes and take your fingers out of your ears. The idea! Scared of a little flash. And stop that fidgeting, all of you." He'd come up in disgust from under the cloth. It was hot under there, and the bending over had made the blood run to his head. "Now stop all that crying, all of you," he'd say furiously. "Do you hear me? Next time I'm going under there, I want to see all of you smiling." He'd submerge again. "I'd said stop that crying. Now smile, or I'll come out and give you something to cry about. Smile so I can see the whites of your teeth. That's more like it." He'd slip a plate holder into the back of the camera. "Ready? Ready? Smile now. Hold it, hold it, hold it." He'd wave the toy furiously, and then there'd be an awful, blinding, roaring flash that shook the room and deposited a fine ash all over us and the floor. Dad would come up, sweaty but grinning. He'd look to see whether the ceiling was still there, and then put down the flash gun and go over and open the windows to let out a cloud of choking smoke that made your eyes water. "I think that was a good picture," he'd say. "And this new flash gun certainly works fine. Don't go away now. I want to take one more as soon as the smoke clears. I'm not sure I had quite enough light that time." For photographs taken in the sunlight, Dad had a delayed action release that allowed him to click the camera and then run and get into the picture himself before the shutter was released. While outdoor pictures did away with the hazard of being blown through the ceiling, they did not eliminate the hazards connected with Dad's temper. The most heavily relied upon prop for outdoor pictures was the family Pierce Arrow, parked with top down in the driveway. Once we were seated to Dad's satisfaction, he would focus, tell us to smile, click the delayed action release, and race for the driver's seat. He'd arrive there panting, and the car would lurch as he jumped in. When the conditions were ideal, there would be just enough time for Dad to settle himself and smile pleasantly before the camera clicked off the exposure. Conditions were seldom ideal, for the delayed action release was unreliable. Sometimes it went off too soon, thus featuring Dad's blurred but ample stern as he climbed into the car. Sometimes it didn't go off for a matter of minutes, during which we sat tensely, with frozen-faced smiles, while we tried to keep the younger children from squirming. Dad, with the camera side of his mouth twisted into a smile, would issue threats from the other side about what he was going to do to all of us if we so much as twitched a muscle or batted an eyelash. Occasionally, when the grumbling instinct got the better of him, he tried to turn around and administer one swift disciplinary stroke, but then turned back again in time to smile before the camera went off. Once, when he lost the gamble, an outstanding action picture resulted, which showed Dad landing a well-aimed and well-deserved clout on the side of Frank's head. Any number of pictures showed various members of the family who had received discipline within a matter of seconds before the shutter clicked, looking anything but pleasant in the swivel seats of the car. The swivel seat occupants received most of the discipline because they were the easiest for Dad to reach, and no one liked to sit there when it was picture-taking time. Sometimes newspaper photographers and men from Underwood would come to the house to take publicity pictures. Dad would whistle assembly, take out his stopwatch, and demonstrate how quickly he could gather. Then he would show the visitors how we could type, send the Morse code, multiply numbers, and speak some French, German, and Italian. Sometimes he'd holler, "Fire!" and we'd drop to the floor and roll up in rugs. Everything seemed to go much smoother when Dad was on our side of the camera, for now he, too, was ordered where to stand, when to lick his lips, and occasionally to stop fidgeting. The rest of us had no trouble looking pleasant after the photographer lectured Dad. In fact, we looked so pleasant we almost popped. "Mr. Gilbreth, will you please stand still, and take your hands out of your pockets. Move a little closer to Mrs. Gilbreth. No, not that close. Look, I want you right here." The photographer would take him by the arm and place him. "Now try to look pleasant, please." "By jingo, I am looking pleasant," Dad finally would say impatiently. "I can't understand one thing," a man from Underwood told Dad one time after the picture-taking was over. "I've been out here several times now. Everything always seems to be going fine until I put my hand under the black cloth to focus. Then, just as if it's a signal, the 4 youngest ones start to cry, and I can never get them to stop until I put the cloth out of sight." "Is that a fact?" was all the information Dad volunteered. Dad had a knack for setting up publicity pictures that tied in with his motion study projects. While he was working for the Remington People, there were the newsreels of us typing touch system on the Moby Dick, the white typewriter with the blind keys. Later, when he got a job with an automatic pencil company, he decided to photograph us burying a pile of wooden pencils. We were in Nantucket at the time. Tom Greaves built a realistic-looking black coffin out of a packing case. 4 weeks we bought and collected wooden pencils until we had enough to fill the coffin. We carried the casket to a sand dune between the Shoe and the ocean, where Dad and Tom dug a shallow grave. It was a desolate, wind-swept spot. The neighbors on the cliff, doubtless concluding that one of us had fallen down and had to be destroyed, watched our actions through binoculars. Dad set up a still camera on a tripod, connected the delayed action attachment, and took a series of pictures showing us lowering the coffin into the grave and covering it with sand. "We'll have to dig up the coffin now and do the same thing all over again so we can get the movies," Dad said. "We're going to hit them coming and going with this one." We dug, being careful not to scratch up the coffin, and then sifted the sand from the pencils. Tom cranked the movie camera while we went through the second funeral. Fortunately, it was before the days of sound movies because Dad had kept hollering instructions. "Turn that crank twice a second, Tom, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Get out from in front of the camera, Ernestine. Marguerite Clark and Mary Pickford have things pretty well lined up out there, you know. Now then, everybody pick up the shovels and heave in the sand. Look serious, this is a sad burial. The good are often interred with their bones. So may it be with pencils. And 1, and 2, and..." When we were through with the second funeral, Dad told us we'd have to dig up the coffin again. "You're not going to take any more pictures, are you?" we begged. "We've taken the stills and the movies." "Of course not," said Dad, "but you don't think we're going to waste all those perfectly good wooden pencils, do you? Dig them up and take them back into the house. They should last us for years." In justification to Dad, it should be said that automatic pencils always were used once the supply of wooden ones was exhausted. Dad simply couldn't stand seeing the wooden ones wasted. The next summer, when Dad was hired as a consultant by a washing machine company, we went through the same procedure with the washboard and hand wringer at Nantucket. This time, though, Tom was prepared. "Wait a minute, Mr. Gilbreth," he said. "Before you bury my wringer, I want to oil it good so I can get the sand off it when we dig it up again." That might not be a bad idea, Dad admitted. After all, he added defensively, I bought you a washing machine from Aunt Claire. I can't have washing machines scattered all along the Atlantic seaboard, you know. I didn't say nothin', said Tom. I just said I wanted to oil my wringer good, that's all. I didn't say nothin' about a washing machine for Nantucket. He started to mutter, efficiency. All I hear around this house is efficiency. I'd like to make one of them lectures about efficiency. The one best way to ruin a wringer is to bury the thing in the sand and then dig it up again. That's motion study for you. What's that? Asked Dad. Speak up if you have anything to say, and if you haven't, keep quiet. Tom continued muttering. Motion study is burying a wringer in the sand and getting the parts all gummed up so that it breaks your back to turn it. That's motion study, as long as it's someone else's motions you're studying and not your own. Lincoln freed the slaves, all but one, all but one. The pictures and write-ups sometimes put us on the defensive in school and among our friends. How come you write with a wooden pencil in school when I saw on the newsreel how your father and all you kids buried a whole casket of them in a grave? Sometimes, and this was worst of all, the teachers would read excerpts from write-ups about the process charts in the bathroom, the language records, and the decisions of the family council. We'd blush and squirm and wish Dad had a nice job selling shoes somewhere, and that he had only had 1 or 2 children, neither of whom was us. The most dangerous reporters, from our standpoint, were the women who came to interview Mother for human interest stories. Mother usually got Dad to sit in on such interviews, because she liked to be able to prove to him and us that she didn't say any of the things they attributed to her, or at least not many of them. Dad derived considerable pleasure from reading these interviews aloud at the supper table, with exaggerated gestures and facial expressions that were supposed to be Mother's. There sat Mrs. Gilbreth, surrounded by her brood, reading aloud a fairy tale, Dad would read. The oldest, almost debutante Anne, wants to be a professional violinist. Ernestine intends to be a painter. Martha and Frank to follow in their father's footsteps. Tell me about your honorary degrees, I asked this remarkable mother of 12. A flush of crimson crept modestly to her cheeks, and she made a depreciating mew. Here, Dad would stop long enough to give his version of a depreciating mew, and hid his face coyly behind an upraised elbow. He resumed reading. I am far more proud of my 12 husky red-blooded American children than I am of my 24 honorary degrees and my membership in the Czechoslovak Academy of Science, Mrs. Gilbreth told me. Mercy Maud, Mother exploded. I never said anything like that. You were there during that interview, Frank. Where did that woman get all of that? If my mother should see that article, I don't know what she'd think of me. That woman never asked me about honorary degrees, and 24? No one ever had 24, unless it was poor Mr. Wilson, and I never said a thing about Czechoslovakia. And I hate and detest people who make deprecating mews. I never made one in my life, or at any rate not since I've been old enough to know better. Meanwhile, both Anne and Ern were near tears. I can't go back to school tomorrow, Anne said. How can I face the class after that business about the violin? How about me? Moaned Ern. At least you own a violin and can make noises come out of it. Ernestine wants to be a painter. How could you tell her that, Mother? And my teacher is sure to read it aloud. She always does. I didn't tell her that or anything else in the article, Mother insisted. Where do you suppose she dreamed up those things, Frank? Dad grinned and went on reading. Mr. Gilbreth, the time study expert, entered the room on tiptoe so as not to disturb his wife's train of thought. Plump but dynamic, Mr. Gilbreth. The grin faded, and Dad tossed the newspaper from him in disgust. What unspeakable claptrap, he grunted. Of all the words in the English language, the one I liked least is plump. The whole article is just a figment of the imagination. One newsreel photographer who visited us in Nantucket deliberately set out to make us look ridiculous. It wasn't a difficult job. If he was acting under instructions from his employers, he should have been paid a bonus. In good faith, Dad moved the dining room table, the chairs, and his pew out onto the beach grass at the right side of our cottage, where the newsreel man said the light would be best. There, amid the sandflies, we ate dinner while the cameraman took pictures. The newsreel, as shown in the movie Houses, opened with a caption which said, "The family of Frank B. Gilbreth, time saver, eats dinner." The rest of it was projected at about 10 minutes the normal speed. It gave the impression that we raced to the table, passed the place madly in all directions, wolfed our food, and ran away from the table, all in about 45 seconds. In the background was the reason the photographer wanted us outside, the family laundry, with, of course, the diapers predominating. We saw the newsreel at the Dreamland Theater in Nantucket, and it got much louder laughs than the comedy, which featured a fat actor named Lloyd Hamilton. Everyone in the Dreamland turned around and gaped at us, and we were humiliated and furious. We didn't even want to go to Coffin's drugstore for a soda when Dad extended a half-hearted invitation after the show. I hope it never comes to the Wellmont in Montclair, we kept repeating. How can we ever go back to school? Well, Dad said, it was a mean trick all right, and I'd like to get my hands on the photographer, but it could have been worse. Do you know what I kept thinking all the way through it? I kept thinking that when it was over, they probably were going to show it again, backwards, so that it would look like we were regurgitating our food back on our plates. I swear, if they had done that, I was going to wreck the place. And I would have helped you, said Mother, honestly. Come on, it's water over the dam, Dad shrugged. Let's forget it. Let's go up to Coffin's after all and get those sodas. I'm ready for a double chocolate soda. What do you say? Under such relentless arm-twisting, we finally gave in and allowed ourselves to be taken to Coffin's.